Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another study of the weekly Torah portion. Today, I'm showing you the Rebbe's talk from volume 21, number 3. Just an introduction to the topic. This week, we read about the Exodus from Egypt and how the Jewish people came all the way 6 days later. After leaving Egypt, they come towards the Nile, the sea. They don't know what to do. They are screaming, they are yelling, they lose their mind. And God turned to Moshe and he says, why are you screaming? Why are you yelling? Why are you praying? It's time to walk, keep going. As soon as they walk through the water, God tell Moshe to hit the water with the staff, and the water split. The Egyptians come through, following the Jews. And as soon as the last Egyptian is in the water, God returned back to the water, and they all drown. At that moment, the Jewish people stood by the shore of the sea. They see all the Egyptians as they drowned and the horses, and they praise God. A song, Az Yashir, that we recite every morning. And in fact, when we recite this part in the Torah, everybody rises. It's a very special praising to God. It comprises of 18 verses. There is an extra verse, number 19, that is very similar to the Amidah prayer. The Amidah prayer has 18 chapters, 18 sections, 18 paragraphs, and the rabbis added another one, number 19, and it's exactly the way the singing and praising God the first time done by a public group. Now we begin the journey towards the Holy Land, and it will take another 3.5 books to describe the events that took place. So the first thing, they come and they complain. That's the first thing they do.
Must be Jews.
Where is my water? Give us water. Demanding and complaining. Rashi says God's anger came because they didn't ask gently, but they came with demands. Their asking was correct. They deserve to have water. But there is a way of speaking, and they did not speak the way they should have. By the way, it's all about the men, it's not the women. God tells Moshe to hit a rock. The rock provides water to show the Jewish people that miracles happen. They have nothing to worry. Everything is going to work out. And yet, immediately after, they want water, no food. And God sends manna. It's all in this week's Torah portion. And then comes Shabbat, and there is no manna. They come to Moshe, what's going on? It broke, the system broke. Moshe says, no, Shabbat, you don't leave your tents. You stay home, you relax, and all that you do before, it will be provided on Shabbat. So you cook before Shabbat, you prepare before Shabbat. On Shabbat, you're supposed to enjoy the food you worked on and prepared on Friday and the day before. So every Friday, you will get double portion, and that's where you're going to save it for the next day, for 2 days. That's one of the reasons we have 2 challahs on Friday night, because there was double portion on Friday. Another time we're going to talk about the double challahs, the 2 challahs, Friday night and Shabbat meals, corresponding to the manna. Yes? Correct. That's the first time. Never mentioned before. Actually, so the obligation to keep Shabbat was given before God comes down on Mount Sinai. God gave us 10 commandments on Mount Sinai. Number 6 is keep the Shabbat. However, the obligation to observe Shabbat and be restricted in what we do was given a little bit earlier. But that's not enough. Again, there is no water, and they did not learn from their lessons, and they want to kill Moshe. That's how mad they are. And God says, Moshe screamed to God, says, what do you want from me? I can't do it anymore. And God says, no, don't worry. Hit the rock again, I'll provide water. And that's what happened. How do they name the place? It's very crucial because we'll make a full circle later. How do they make that place, the spot where they're fighting Moshe, and Moshe says they want to kill me? Masa umeriva. Complaints and fighting. Why? Al riv bnei Israel, because the Jewish people are fighting Moshe, ve'al nasotam et Hashem, for testing God. Ayesh Hashem bekirbeinu imayin. Is there a God among us or not? They testing God. They did not believe there is a God. They weren't sure.
After all the miracles.
After all that's taken place. Right. And one can only wonder. Now we come into the topic of our discussion. Immediately thereafter, Vayovoy Amalek. Amalekite, the Jew hater, the pure hate of a Jew, of a human, came, Vailachem im Israel b'Refidim, and had a fight to wage war against the Jewish people. And the question is that there was a cloud of glory that protected the Jewish people. How was he able to fight them? And the answer is, there were some people that were outside the cloud, the Erev Rav, the mixture that came out of Egypt that wanted to be part of Jewish people. They did not convert yet because the Torah was not given, so they were outside the cloud. And Amalekite comes to wage war. All he does is kill some of them. Moshe tells Yehoshua, Yehoshua is his servant, Bechar lanu anashim, choose for us strong men, V'tzei, go out, outside the cloud, meaning go out of the cloud. Hilochem ba'amalek machar. Fight Amalekite tomorrow. The word machar, tomorrow, is going to be crucial also. And I will stand on top of the mountain, and the staff of God is in my hand, and together we will find, because b'char lanu, not lecha, choose for us, meaning Moshe is included in the war. How is he going to fight? He's going to stand on top of the mountain with God's staff, and you're going to go with the men with the swords and daggers and kill. And the next verse, Yehoshua did as God told them. He chose men. Moshe, Aaron, and Hur. Hur is the son of Miriam, his nephew, Moshe's nephew. Aaron is his older brother. All three men went up the mountain. And it says, when Moshe lift his arms, Vegavar Israel winning, they are victorious. But when Yaniach Yado, when he lowers his hands, Vegavar Amalek, Amalekites were victorious. And the next verse, Videi Moshe Kvedim, the hands of Moshe are very heavy, because holding your hands like that is very hard, it's heavy. Vaikhu Even, they took a rock. Vayasimu tachtav, those two men, Aaron and Hur, put a rock, a large rock, under Moshe so he can sit down, because standing or holding your hands is very difficult. Vayeshev aleh, and Moshe sat down, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were in faithful continuously up until sunset. And that's how the next verse is Yehoshua wiped out most of the Amalekites. He did not kill all of them. He left the women and the young children, which later it caused a lot of trouble, but he did as best as he was supposed to. This is and God says to Moshe, I want you to write it forever, that I will never rest as long as Amalekite is alive, and you have a commandment, an obligation to wipe out Amalekites. This is the end of this week's Torah portion. So to summarize, what I want to talk about is that the hands of Moshe were heavy, and they needed to support him. So he's Aaron on one side, Hur on the other, supporting, holding his hands, because as we read the verse before, as long as his hands are upwards, the Jewish people win. If it would end down, the Amalekites will win, and Moshe was victorious. A lot can be discussed, but I chose one topic. The hands of Moshe are heavy. What does that mean, the hands of Moshe are heavy? Rashi, the commentator, tell us that Moshe was very lazy. He was lazy in fulfilling the mitzvah of fighting Amalekite, because he appointed Yehoshua, Joshua, to fight instead. Therefore, his hands became very heavy. He could not hold them. It was very, very painful, so much that 2 men had to support it. That's Rashi. The Rebbe is going to ask, I have here about 4 questions. The first question, the Rebbe says, if you go back to Shmot, at the beginning of this book, there is a story about Moshe not circumcising his son. And a snake, a serpent, comes and eats him up, top half, the bottom half. Then Tzipporah, his wife, realizes what happens, and she circumcised Eliezer, and that's how his life was saved. Over there, Rashi and all the commentators says that he was lazy about circumcising his son, so God is punishing him. In other words, and then Rashi brings another one. Rashi says, Rabbi Yossi says, God forbid he was lazy. It was because he wanted to fulfill God's commandment. We studied last week. He said, if I circumcise my son, I'll be stuck here for 3 days. You're not supposed to travel with someone who's had an operation. And therefore, he delayed it. That's Rabbi Yossi. But the first one is that he was lazy, and that's why he was punished, right? Says, I don't understand. This happened about 8 months earlier, 10 months earlier, 12 months earlier, the maximum. So he was already lazy about fulfilling God's commandment to circumcise his son, and he saw the outcome. How can you tell me now he's lazy by appointing someone else? That's question number 1. Number 2, Rashi, when he says that he was lazy about circumcision, Rashi brings a second commentary. Rabbi Yossi said, God forbid, that's the way Rabbi Yossi says, God forbid to say Moshe is lazy. He's never lazy. It's just because he had a dilemma. Here, Rashi is not bringing a second opinion. How come Rashi takes it simply that Moshe was lazy? Leon, do you understand the second question?
I think so.
All right, the third question. The Medrash brings 2 other reasons, and Rashi omitted them. The Medrash says that one reason, how do we know that Moshe was lazy? Because he tells Yehoshua, Machar, tomorrow we're going to fight. How come he waited for tomorrow? Because of that, he was punished for delaying the war by 1 day. Says the Rebbe, okay, that's another reason to be lazy. A lazy person pushes it off for mañana, literally mañana. But the second comment, this is Targum Yonatan. The second one is Psikta. The Psikta says that the reason his hands were heavy has nothing to do with being lazy. It had to do with the Jewish people. Why did Amalekite come to wage war? As the Gemara brings an example, or a child is sitting on the shoulder of his father, and his father saves him from dogs, from sharp objects on the ground, and suddenly the child forgets that he's on the shoulders of his father, and he sees passerby and says, did you see my father? Have you seen my father? So his father says, the guy does not see where he's sitting. He drops him on the ground, comes the dog and bites him, and he screams, Daddy, Daddy. So now he says to him, oh, I'm here. Now you see me. Says the Gemara, Medrash, you're familiar with that story? No. Says the Medrash, God is carrying him on his shoulders, and they say, Ayesh Hashem, his God is with us. They tested God. I'm going to chase a dog. I'm going to bring a dog to chase you.
I have a general question.
Just a minute, before you have a general question. So therefore, God is sending Amalekite to make them return back to God, to pray to God to be saved. That's why Amalekite came. So that's why the Medrash says his hands were heavy, nothing to do with being lazy, as a punishment for the Jewish people's behavior. Says the Rebbe, if so, why Rashi chose to say that Moshe was lazy? That's the third question. Here is a fourth one, if you can hold on. So the first question, we read before that Moshe was lazy and he was punished. It should serve as a lesson not to be lazy. The second question over there, the first time we say Moshe was lazy, Rashi brings a second commentary that refutes the idea that he was lazy. Here, Rashi does not come from with a second commentary, he just makes it simple, he was lazy. Number 3, commentators give us other reasons. One of them, it has to do with the Jewish people for misbehaving. That's why Moshe's hands were heavy. Why Rashi chose to avoid this commentary? The Torah does not speak disparagingly about anybody, even about the animals. Here you say that he was lazy, it's not right. And the fourth question, the Rebbe says, if you read in the book of Numbers, Moshe turned to God and says, I'm 120 years old. I'm an old man. Appoint someone to lead the Jewish people like me. What do you mean like me? Rashi says that unlike kings of other nations that reside in their dwellings, in their palaces, and they sent the army to fight on their behalf. Here, I went first. In the war of Sichon and Og, two giants, Moshe was the one to fight instead of the Jewish people. He was first. There was a war with Midian that recorded in the book of Numbers. Moshe goes first. In other words, it's impossible to say that Moshe was lazy, because that's when, now he's 80 years old, an old man. But later on, he's 120, and he goes to war, and he's asking God to appoint someone that's as courageous as he is, that when there is a danger, when an enemy comes against the Jewish people, Moshe, the leader, is first. How is it possible to say that 40 years earlier, when there is a war against the Jewish people, Moshe would be lazy to fight them, and instead of fighting with daggers and swords, he's standing on top of the mountain, and that means that he was lazy. Did you understand the 4 questions? What's coming?
You can't say that Moshe was lazy on the last day of his life. He wrote all these Torahs and did all this work on his last day. What I'm saying, though, is God is almighty. What does he need anybody to do anything about Amalek? He could write them out himself.
Right, but he wanted us to be partners.
Okay, but the partner says, if you do your part, I'll do my part, and we'll wipe them out together.
All right, that's what happened, actually.
No, Amalek lived on with Haman and all these people.
All right, so that there is a reason for it, but that's not the discussion for today. I'll come for another lesson, and I'll show it you the reason. Let's concentrate on the topic, because as is, it's covering so much. To summarize, Rashi says that the Moshe's hands on top of the mountain were heavy, that they needed a rock. He needed a rock to sit on, and he needed 2 men to support him, because he was lazy about fulfilling the mitzvah of fighting Amalekite. Instead of fighting himself, he appointed Joshua. Says the Rabbi, 8 months earlier, he was punished so severely for being lazy, and how come he didn't learn a lesson? Number 2, over there, it's disputed if he was lazy. Rabbi Yosef says he would never be lazy. Here, Rashi is not bothering with another explanation. Perhaps he was for another reason. Number 3, says the Rabbi, the commentators, the Medrash says, that wasn't about lazy, it was about the Jewish people misbehaving. And therefore, it has nothing to do with Moshe. That's why he suffered the pain that was supposed to be coming on the Jewish people as a leader. And number 4, later on, 40 years later, he turned to God and he's asking to appoint a leader that's unique for the Jewish people, and that is, he tells the people, follow me, not go ahead, follow me. He lives by example. He leads by example. As we know, Sichon and Og, God says to him, do not fear, go and kill him yourself. With Midian, he appointed 12,000 men, and he tells Moshe, you go out in the front. In other words, Moshe knew that a Jewish leader, should carry a bow and arrow and swords and fight. Here to say that the reason he went up the mountain is because he's lazy to fight, it just does not make sense. Here is the explanation. There is a much deeper discussion that I am avoiding. I'm sorry. Yeah, there is.
We know that.
Because there's a difference between being lazy because it's a fascinating discussion. The Rebbe makes a distinction between lazy about a specific area versus lazy in general. In the previous time in Shmot, the Torah says nitrashel. Nitrashel is a Hebrew word that described laziness in general. Just lazy, I'm not in the mood. Here, Rashi used the word nit'atzel. It's a different description, which refers to specific laziness about this specific area. But I don't want to get into it, because then you'll be sitting here for another hour. Says the Rabbi, Moshe was not a lazy person. It's impossible to say for a godly man that he was lazy. There was something specific here that he felt that it's not his role to go wage war. And here is how the Rabbi explains it. The Rebbe says that until now, as Harry pointed out, everything was miraculous. There was nothing natural. The splitting of the sea, then the water, the bitter water turned into sweet water, and then they get the manna, and then the manna does not come on Shabbat, and then they get the water that comes out of a rock. It's all run supernatural. You can't begin to explain any detail of it. But suddenly Amalekite comes to wage war. The reason Amalekite came to wage war, says the Rebbe, it wasn't like other future wars where he was fighting the Jewish people as they were righteous people. Here, they question God, they deny God, they want to kill Moshe. They are the most stubborn, egotistic, low-life people at the time because they were provided with so much. And they deny all that, and they turn around and spit at the hand that provided them. That's what the Torah tells us, that they say, we are not sure if there is a God among us. What's the next verse? Vayavo Amalek, Amalekite came. As I shared with you, the reason Amalekite came is like a child sitting on the shoulder of his father being protected from the elements and creatures, and he's turning around asking, where is God? Where is my father? And God says, okay, I'll drop you, and then you're going to get beat by a dog. That's when you'll turn back and say, oh, here is my father who is protecting me. So the only purpose of the war with Amalekite was to remind them that there is a God. So it's not going to happen miraculously. It's going to happen naturally. Says the Rebbe, Moshe felt an 80-year-old man does not belong to fight in a natural war. The Torah defined the age of warriors as between, anybody knows?
60,
Is the limit.
20 to 60.
Close. Between 20 and 60. Once you reach 60, you don't belong in war. Under 20, you are not mature enough. In the Torah, today we know people are drafted in Israel at least 18. Here in America, I think earlier 17. But once you reach 60, you are not fit to fight. By the way, Joshua at the time was either 47 or 57. But Joshua was the general in command. He was under 60 for sure. Moshe felt the other wars that took place 40 years later, Moshe was 120 years old. But God is going to perform the war. He just had to fake it, so to say, to be there. So therefore, there was no limit to his age. His age don't matter. At this point, the reason there is a war is because God is removed from the Jewish people. Therefore, it has to be a natural fight. If it's a natural fight, Moshe, an 80-year-old man, should not go fighting. Who is going to be? Joshua. Let me just finish, okay, before you ask the questions. Therefore, he felt that like every war, there are two components to make a war a successful war. One is the physical, natural conduct, which is fighting with weapons, strong men that are trained, that know how to trick an enemy and kill. But then there is another component, pray to God to save us. The prayer to God is as equal, as important as fighting. So Moshe felt Joshua is going to do one half. Go to the field, to the battlefield. He's going to fight, he's going to kill, he's going to chase, he's going to get rid of Amalekites. Me, I cannot fight physically. I'll go up the mountain and pray. Why should I go up the mountain? Because over there, the warriors, the soldiers will see me praying. They'll see my face. They'll see me, and they will be courageous. They will give them the encouragement and the energy to continue fighting. That's why he goes up the mountain. Otherwise, why did he go up the mountain? He could have prayed in his tent. The reason he went to the mountain, he wants to be a partner in the war. Before we find out what was wrong, just his understanding of what his role is. So he felt that the reason they are being faced, the enemy of Amalekite, is as a lesson that they need to learn. If it's a lesson, God is not going to be part of it. Otherwise, the lesson will not be learned. B, He said to himself, I am not a soldier, natural soldier. Everything that happened to Moshe throughout history, he was a very mighty, strong man and made many, many miracles, is when it was needed, when God assured them that's going to work out. Here, they were supposed to do it in a natural way. Moshe, 80 years old, does not fit for fight. He is going to be praying. So he goes up the mountain, so all the soldiers will see that he's praying, and they have nothing to worry. That's his analogy. Says the Rebbe, he was punished. Why was he punished? Because if it was a war, and we're going to go a step deeper to this point, I'm just sharing it, passing through very quick. Whenever it's a war against God, Amalekite was fighting God. The Jewish people represent God. Whenever there was a war against God, everybody has to participate. There are no exceptions to the rule. He was supposed to take an arrow and a bow, take swords, and go to war. The fact that he cannot run as fast, the fact that he's not trained properly, he has to leave it up to God. And perhaps if he wants to pray, he can pray in the battlefield. He did not need to seclude himself and go and pray on top of the mountain. This itself was called laziness, not willing to accept that even he, as a holy man, that's already past the age of army, serving the army, but being a leader, he was supposed to be part of the group and go and fight. And the Rebbe points out, Moshe should have known it. It happened just a week, 10 days earlier. They stood by the Sea of Reeds in this week's Torah portion. And some of them, Moshe is praying to God to make miracles. What does God say to him? Ma titzak elai. Why are you screaming to me? Why are you praying to me? Daber el bnei Israel ve'isau. Keep moving. Action. In other words, God already, there was an event that took place 10 days earlier where he was praying to God for miracles. And God says, so miracles will happen when you are doing your part. You need to do your part. Keep moving and showing faith. And therefore, praying to pray when there is a terrible event is not the right thing to do. Moshe was supposed to be at the battlefield, and he did not learn that. That's what we call laziness. Says Rebbe, that will explain that the punishment was what? With his hands being heavy. What does it mean his hands were up? As the Torah says, if his hands are up, is good. If his hands are down, Amalekites win. Hands up, meaning turning to God in meditation and praying. That's what it means. That's why when you want to show a picture, a painting of someone praying, well, you do like that. In Jewish tradition, whenever people call out to God, they call out to God like that, although God is here too. But that's how you do it. You refer to spirituality, you do this. You know it from Moshe, from this expulsion. In other words, the very reason that he decided to pray and not to fight is the punishment in that very act, where his hands became very heavy. He has done many other acts that require a lot of might, and we don't find it was hard for him. So it should have been possible for him to hold his hands for 12 hours for the entire day until sunset without an issue. But because he chose to pray rather than fight and go to battle, that's where God shows him a sign that the prayer is not in the right place now, and the hands become heavy. Yes.
To kill anybody up until this point.
Yes.
The Egyptian.
Hey, I haven't done this since elementary school. So he
He already
has no
killed.
experience of
Oh
that.
yeah, he's a warrior. He killed many people. The Torah tells us about an Egyptian.
Two.
That's okay. It's nothing about wanting, it's about the ability, and he's able to. Later on, when he's 120 years old, he kills giants, 2 giants. He himself jumps and he hits them and he kills them. So
That's at the end of the Torah. That none of his strength had weakened.
never,
Right.
his
So he
strength
should-
never weakened till the last day of his life. The Torah testifies.
We should have led the Israel.
There is no doubt that he was able to. He just felt that because it's a natural fight, His part is prayer, and Joshua's part is the fight. And God is not happy. God wants to teach us a lesson that his part shouldn't be part of the war. And prayer, we could do prayer, make prayer during the battle, in between. Says the Rebbe, what the Torah tells us, at the end, God says, Ktov zot zikaron b'sefer. Put this in writing in the Torah forever, that everyone should know this story. What is this story so unique? Who are the people that they are going to save? Not the Jewish people, the entire camp that was inside the cloud, because the cloud protected them from arrows, protected them from swords and enemy. Nobody can come and touch them. We read that the Egyptians, this week's Torah portion, were unable. They were throwing rocks, they were throwing arrows, and the cloud was absorbing them. It's in the text. There were only people outside the cloud, people that wanted to connect to Jewish people, but they are not yet converted to Judaism. Even those, we call them michutz la'anan, outside the cloud, people who are strangers. They are not perfect. They are not all holy that they belong to be included inside the cloud. Even for them, God tells Moshe forever, whenever someone comes to hurt them, we need to stop, and there is no room for prayer or study, but go out and wage war and fight them. That's the reason God tells us the story, and that's why Rashi chose that's the only explanation, and doesn't say, God forbid, he was lazy. Yeah, you can blame it on Jewish people, but then what's the lesson forever? The lesson God tells them, Moshe, right after the war, the last verse of this week's portion, is put it in writing forever for everyone to know that the only way God will rest is when we fight Amalekites. Who is Amalekite? Baseless hater. He hates the people, and he's trying to catch people at the outskirts, people who are not mainstream, not part of the group. They're the outsiders. We need to look after all these people and say to ourselves, we have to protect them, and it's our responsibility. That's why Rashi does not bring even as a second commentary that it was not Moshe's fault. That's why Rashi does not avoid the whole point, but Rashi says, no, he was lazy in this mitzvah, meaning that he meant not lazy in general, he meant that his role would be to pray. And God said to him, that's not the right role. The right role would be to participate in war with the army.
God
Yes.
asked Moshe to help the Erev Rav because they were outside the camp.
Right.
These are the very same people that later on did the Chet
A lot of trouble came from them.
Right. So they should have destroyed them, and that would be the end of it. We'd have a happier life.
So thank God you're not God. Because if you're God, there will be no chance for my survival.
The question he always asks is, when did you become a rabbi?
So thank God, Baruch Hashem, you're not God.
That relates to this, the commandment at the end of the Torah portion that says, may this be for the generations to come.
Right.
What is the blessing? What is the prayer?
It's a verse in the Torah. God says to him, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Hashem says to Moshe, Ktov zot, write it down, Zikaron b'sefer, a memorial in the book, V'sim be'oznei Yoshua, and put it in the ears of Joshua, the next leader. Ki macho emchet zecher Amalek, because it is my responsibility to wipe out completely the Amalekite. So God tells Moshe, write it down, also teach it verbally to Yoshua, so he should teach it in the future generations. So one of the memories that we must remember every single day is to wipe out the Amalekites. We have a mitzvah to remember Shabbat every day. We have a mitzvah to remember Exodus from Egypt every day. We have a mitzvah to remember that Amalekite is a baseless hater, that we have a mitzvah to wipe them out. And it's all from this week's portion. But the Rebbe says that the message that God wants to teach us is that there is no room when you face someone who hates us plainly. There's no dispute about land. There's no dispute about resources. It's just pure hate. We need to stop everything and fight them heads on. And there is no one to be excused. Age should not be a barrier. Limitation should not be a barrier. Everybody must go and wage war. And that's the lesson from the end of this week's portion. What?